Some people, you don't need to explain why you're quietly walking away. The truth is, not every relationship deserves a final conversation. Some people only need your silence, a quiet retreat, no anger, no confrontation. Because sometimes your peace is worth far more than being understood. I've seen this pattern in hundreds of therapy sessions. People clinging to connections long after they've expired, explaining, justifying, begging to be seen, and ending up even more hurt. Have you ever done that? Tried to prove you weren't wrong, only to realize the other person never wanted to understand in the first place? Today, I want to invite you to do something different, to let silence be your answer. I'll show you 15 types of people you should quietly distance yourself from, not with war, but with space, by no longer allowing them to drain your energy and your joy. And when this video ends, I believe you'll see some people are meant to stay in your past, so your future can finally feel lighter. 1. The gossip collector. Have you ever shared something deeply personal, only to hear it retold days later, twisted and exaggerated in ways you never said? If so, you've probably met the gossip collector, the kind of person who treats your life like free entertainment. One of my clients once said, "I'm not afraid of betrayal. I'm afraid I trusted the wrong person." In psychology, people like this often crave attention. They trade other people's secrets as a form of social currency, something that makes them feel important in conversations. If you recognize someone like that, step back quietly. Keep your boundaries sharp. Be polite, be friendly, but don't give them access to the private corners of your heart. Because sometimes silence and distance are the strongest ways to protect your trust. 2. The nostalgic prisoner. Do you know someone who keeps saying, "You've changed," as if that's a bad thing? Someone who constantly talks about the old days, trying to pull you back into a version of yourself you've already outgrown? That's the nostalgic prisoner, a person stuck in the past. In psychology, we call it emotional anchoring. They cling to old memories to avoid facing the uncertainty of the present. I once worked with a client who couldn't accept that their friend had grown and changed. They missed how things used to be. But by holding on to an outdated version of someone, they lost the chance to truly know the person standing in front of them. If you have someone like that in your life, smile at the memories and then move on. You don't need to stay trapped in an old story just to make someone else comfortable. Honor the past, but don't let it imprison you. Only by stepping out of the old photographs can you live fully as the person you've become. 3. The perpetual victim. Have you ever talked to someone who, no matter what happens, is always the victim? They complain about their job, their family, their partner. And in every story, someone else is always to blame. That's the perpetual victim. In psychology, this is called learned helplessness. They've trained themselves to believe they can't change anything. Instead of taking action, they seek pity, because feeling pitied makes them feel seen. I once had a client who called me every week, not to find solutions, but to repeat the same painful story. Because the pain itself gave her a sense of identity. If you have someone like that in your life, I know you'll want to help them, but be careful. The more you try to rescue them, the deeper you'll sink into their emotional quicksand. They don't need a savior. They need a mirror to see how they're repeating their own suffering. And sometimes, the best way to help is to step back so they can learn to stand on their own. 4. The opportunist. Do you have a friend who disappears for months, then suddenly messages you, "Hey, it's been forever. By the way, can you help me with something?" That's the opportunist, someone who treats friendship like a pit stop. They show up to refuel, then vanish once they've taken what they need. In psychology, this is called a transactional relationship, not built on care, but on exchange. I'll stay as long as you're useful to me. I've seen so many kind-hearted people trapped in that pattern, afraid to say no because they don't want to seem cold or selfish. But if you're always available whenever they need something, you're teaching them that your time, your energy, your kindness are free and endless. Next time they appear only to ask for more, try silence, no anger, no lecture. Because sometimes your absence is the lesson they need most, to learn that emotional responsibility starts with themselves. 5. The dream crusher. Have you ever shared a dream and someone instantly poured cold water on it? Oh, come on. That's not realistic. That's the dream crusher, the person who calls themselves practical, but is actually ruled by fear. In psychology, we call this projection. They throw their own fear, their own failures, onto you. I once had a client who dreamed of opening a small shop. Her friends laughed. You? Start a business? That'll never work. She gave up before she even began. Not because she wasn't capable, but because she believed in someone else's fear. Remember this, the person who crushes your dreams isn't being realistic. They're just protecting their own comfort zone. So choose carefully who you share your dreams with. Talk to people who dare to dream, who take risks, who believe. And when you meet someone who only sows doubt, smile, thank them, and keep walking, because your dream doesn't need anyone's permission to become real. If what I've shared in this video resonates with you, if you've found yourself thinking, that's exactly it, leave a like so I know you're walking this healing and growth journey with me. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, because every week I'll be sharing new videos about psychology, behavior, and how to build lasting inner peace. You never know. A short video might be exactly what you or someone you love needs to hear today. Let's build a community of hearts that know how to love, to let go, and to choose peace. 6. The boundary breaker. Have you ever felt guilty for saying no to someone, as if protecting your own time and energy was somehow wrong? If so, you've probably met the boundary breaker, the person who makes you feel guilty just for having limits. In psychology, this is a form of emotional manipulation. They convince you that saying no is selfish, that you should always be available, agreeable, and accommodating. I once had a client, incredibly kind, but completely exhausted. She said, I don't even know why I apologize every time I just want to be alone. Here's the truth. You never need to apologize for choosing peace. Saying no doesn't make you cold or distant. It means you respect your own boundaries. If someone gets angry, disappointed, or tries to guilt trip you, remember, their reaction is not your responsibility. Say no, gently but firmly, because only when you protect your own space can you truly live fully within it. 7. The energy vampire. Have you ever talked to someone who, after just a short conversation, leaves you feeling drained, heavy, like the life was pulled right out of you? That's not your imagination. That's the energy vampire. In therapy, I often tell my clients, your body knows before your mind does. When you leave a conversation feeling anxious, tired, or empty, pay attention. That's your intuition speaking. Energy vampires rarely realize what they're doing. They carry anxiety, insecurity, and emotional chaos, and they seek relief by unloading it onto others. One woman once told me, every time I see my best friend, I come home completely exhausted, but I keep meeting her because I don't want her to think I'm distant. Months later, after creating some space, she said she was sleeping better, focusing more, and, for the first time in years, felt genuinely happy. Trust your body, it never lies. If someone consistently drains your energy, step back quietly. You don't need to explain or accuse. Because when you protect your energy, you're protecting your mental health and your soul. 8. The chronic critic. Have you ever met someone who always finds something to criticize? No matter what you do? You get promoted. They say it's luck. You lose a few pounds. They say, must be a good filter. That's the chronic critic, someone who never seems truly happy to see you grow. In psychology, this behavior often comes from deep insecurity. They put others down to feel worthy, because inside, they're terrified of being left behind. I once worked with a woman who constantly judged everyone around her. When we looked deeper, We found she grew up in a home where love was conditional, where she was only good enough if she excelled. So she learned to project that same harsh standard onto the world. If you live around people like that, it's easy to fall into the trap of proving yourself, chasing their approval that never truly comes. But you don't need anyone's validation to know you're enough. The moment you stop seeking recognition from someone who only looks through a lens of criticism, something amazing happens. You realize you don't need them to speak softer. You just need to step out of the noise. And that's where peace begins. 9. The competitive friend. Have you ever shared good news, something you're genuinely proud of, and the person just gives a forced smile before immediately talking about their success? That's the competitive friend, the one who can't truly celebrate you because your success makes them feel small. In psychology, this is called the social comparison trap. They don't necessarily mean harm. They've just learned to measure their worth by being better than others. One of my clients once said, "My best friend always cheered me on until I became more successful than her." It's not rare. Sometimes jealousy doesn't come from enemies. It comes from the people who once stood right beside you. But here's what matters. You don't need to punish them or dim your light to make them comfortable. Just share less. Save your joys for the people who genuinely glow when you shine. You're not hiding your victories. You're protecting your energy. Because your happiness deserves to be celebrated by those who can truly celebrate with you. 10. The integrity corruptor. Have you ever met someone who convinces you to do something that deep down you know is wrong? They say things like, "Come on, everyone does it," or "Don't take it so seriously. It's no big deal." But later, that small thing keeps you up at night, filling you with guilt and discomfort, because you know you stepped outside your own moral line. That's the integrity corruptor, the person who slowly erodes your values and sense of honesty. In behavioral psychology, people like this tend to normalize unethical behavior to justify their own choices. They can't handle guilt, so they pull you into the gray zone, to make themselves feel less alone in their wrongdoing. I once worked with a man who lost his job after following a friend's advice to cut a few corners. The friend said, "It's harmless." But that harmless decision cost him both his career and his self-respect. If you ever have to choose between a relationship and your values, choose your values. Relationships can change, but integrity is not something you can easily repair. When you stand by your principles, you might lose a few people, but what you gain is far greater. The peace that comes from knowing you stayed true to yourself. 11. The constant crisis maker. Do you know someone who always seems to be in the middle of a crisis? Morning, fighting with co-workers. Afternoon, betrayed by a friend. Evening, convinced the whole world is against them. That's the constant crisis maker. Someone addicted to chaos, someone who needs drama like oxygen just to feel alive. In psychology, we call this emotional addiction. Their brain gets used to stress and seeks out drama to trigger the same chemical rush as excitement. One client once told me, "When things get too calm, I start to panic." If someone like that is in your life, don't get pulled into their storm, because when you try to put out their fire, they'll only pour more fuel on it. Instead, stay grounded, stay calm, observe. Calmness doesn't mean indifference. It's the strength of someone who understands that chaos isn't proof of being alive. It's a sign of imbalance. When you refuse to join their drama, you're sending the most powerful message of all. I choose peace over storms. 12. The guilt tripper. Have you ever met someone who makes you feel guilty simply because you didn't do what they wanted? They say things like, "I thought you cared about me," or "If you were really my friend, you'd do it." And instantly, your chest tightens, your heart sinks, even though you did nothing wrong. That's the guilt tripper. In psychology, this is a subtle form of emotional control. They don't yell or threaten. They use guilt to make you feel like the bad guy. One of my clients used to say yes to everything her mother asked because she didn't want to make her mom sad. But every time she chose herself, her mother would cry, and she would collapse under the weight of guilt. If this sounds familiar, pause and ask yourself, is this guilt truly justified? Some guilt doesn't come from your conscience. It comes from someone else's manipulation. Once you recognize that, you'll feel lighter. Because saying no doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you someone who respects your own emotional boundaries. 13. The pessimist magnet. Do you know someone who always starts their sentences with, "Yeah, but," no matter how positive your idea is, they always find a reason it won't work? That's the pessimist magnet, someone who sees problems in every solution and shadows in every bit of light. One man I worked with used to say, "I'm not negative, I'm just realistic." But his realism drained everyone around him. Research shows that being around chronically negative people actually raises cortisol, the stress hormone linked to fatigue, anxiety, and even weakened immunity. In other words, negative energy can literally make you sick. If you have someone like that in your life, learn to take a step back. You can't change their worldview, but you can choose not to let them pull you down to their frequency. Keep a healthy distance, not because you hate them, but because you love your peace of mind. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for a pessimist is to not let them make you forget that the world still holds beauty. 14. The control freak. Do you know someone who always thinks they know what's best for you? What to wear, who to date, what job to take, even how to live your life. They say it's because they care, but what they really want is control. In psychology, this behavior stems from dominant tendencies, a need to control their environment to soothe their own anxiety. One client of mine grew up with a controlling mother. Her mom loved her deeply, but that love turned into control. "I just want what's best for you. Why won't you listen?" So she grew up carrying guilt every time she made her own choice. Here's what you need to know. You can't calm a controller by giving in. The more you surrender, the more they'll take. Instead, stand firm. Thank them for caring, but stay true to your path. Because the moment you hand over the steering wheel of your life, you lose the right to be yourself. And you deserve a life that's yours, not one designed to make someone else feel comfortable. 15. The two-faced companion. Have you ever met someone who praises you to your face, but the moment you turn your back, they tell your story, twisted, to someone else? They claim to care, but their actions only leave you hurt and confused. That's the two-faced companion, the person who fears losing you but lacks the honesty to keep you through truth. In psychology, this often comes from insecure attachment, a fear of rejection that drives them to manipulate relationships to maintain control. One client once told me, "My best friend always defends me in person, but she's also the first to spread my private stories." She said, "I don't even know whether to be angry or to feel sorry for her." The truth is, you don't need to be angry, and you don't need to justify their behavior. When trust breaks, no apology can fully restore it. Believe actions over words. When someone shows you they can't be trusted, don't patch it with excuses. Forgiveness is noble, but allowing repeated harm isn't kindness. It's self-abandonment. I know, saying goodbye to a relationship is never easy, especially when that person once meant so much to you. But remember this, not everyone you walk away from is a bad person. Sometimes your values, your energy, and your paths simply no longer align. I've seen so many people hold on to empty relationships, afraid of loneliness, afraid of being misunderstood, afraid of seeming cold. But here's the truth. Staying close to someone who drains you, who makes you doubt yourself, who steals your peace, that's what's truly frightening. Leaving in silence isn't unkind. It's a conscious act of self-protection, a sign of emotional maturity. Because when you know who belongs in your life and who doesn't, you're sending yourself the most powerful message of all. I deserve peace. Let toxic connections fade quietly. No anger, no explanations. Because sometimes silence isn't an ending. It's the beginning of a new chapter, where you finally get to live light, clear, and more alive than ever before.